Hi, everybody. My name is Cassidy. I'm the director of KIFF2023, and with me today is Sarah Shively, the producer of Darcelle on Life, Love, and Dying. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to come down to the festival next week.
Oh yeah, we'll have a great time for sure. And before we kind of start the Q&A, I definitely wanted to, share KIFF2023's condolences on Walter passing away earlier this year. It's kind of goes to attest to the lasting endurance of film and making a story like this and sharing Darcelle's story with the world, especially kind of all the points that it hits on throughout the short film. So it's
Yeah.
pretty beautiful to get to share it at our film festival.
Yeah. No, that I'm really glad that you picked it up at this time because, of course, it has a lot more meaning for people right now, and it's been an amazing outpouring of support and love since Walter passed away. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a difficult time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that kind of brings me to my first question is how did this documentary come about? How did you find Walter and working with it and throughout filming and everything? How did this whole idea start?
So at the time, I was a student at the School of Journalism and Communication, University of Oregon, and their Portland location. And our cohort was doing a capstone project about Old Town. Our location for the campus, the Portland campus, is right in Old Town.
Wow.
And so we had different groups wanting to focus on different businesses, different cultural events. Some people wanted to focus on the homeless community. I wanted to focus on Darcelle.
Mhm.
And that was largely driven by the fact that I knew that the Showplace was one of the oldest running businesses in the community,
Wow.
that Darcelle had been so widely accepted by the Chinese community there.
Wow.
Uh, but also timely. The Showplace had just been chosen to be on the National Register for Historic Places.
Wow.
And I thought that was really, really incredible. And I think it's probably unheard of that a location would be chosen while it's still open and the owner is still living and all those kinds of things. But largely thanks to Don Horn, this had been pushed through, but it was a very long process. And so that was what initially got us going on the project.
Sure.
And as we started to connect with people, we eventually were able to build the trust and get to a point where we could do the interview with Darcelle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a whole other thing when making a documentary, especially of this type, where it's where are these hesitations coming from? How do you build that trust? How do you talk with them and make sure that their story is told in a way that they would want it to be told? So what was that kind of like, and were there hesitations from people? How did you get that trust built?
Uh, well, it happened that I had done some benefit auction work previously and had worked with Poison Waters.
Wow.
Uh, and so I had some inroads. I didn't know, we really started with Don Horn. I didn't know Don personally, but because the point of entry had to do with the historical um, designation, he was fairly open to that interview. We didn't really go into this project with any intention of coming out with what is, essentially sort of a
Wow.
eulogy piece.
Right.
Our questions were much more vivid and about things that were going on at the time, and we were all still in the pandemic too, right? So that was, in some respects, probably a good thing for us because it meant that people were a little bit more available than they might have been otherwise, in terms of getting through the door. But we worked carefully to build these relations, and some of the, well, personally, my favorite interview, which was kind of one we wouldn't have expected to be so amazing was the interview with Bambi Oli, who was Walter's caregiver. I really loved the interview with her. She's certainly not a character that people sort of know about within this inner circle of the Darcelle family.
Sure.
And yet she gave such an incredible interview.
And isn't that how it kind of goes about? You know, you're there and it's always the people that are most unexpected in a way that tend to really give the heart and really give the soul of what's going on behind the scenes. So I love
Yeah.
that you had that experience and everything. So that's so beautiful. And I also did love her interview. You can totally see it. So what when talking with these people, how do you work with them, especially in post, where you're using all of this footage, but you want this the shape of the story to be what they would, want and everything. So did you work with them one on one, sending them the footage and say, hey, here's where we're at. Do you like this? Should we go forward with it? Or did you just show at the end? What was kind of that process like?
Well, in this particular process, since this was a student film,
Right.
we weren't beholden to anyone's approval on
Very
what the
true.
end product was. And by this point, once we got to post, it was largely in Christina's hands in terms of the shaping. And
Mhm.
she was the one who was really more interested in kind of zeroing in on some of these end of life questions.
Wow.
And so by the time and all of them had spoken to it on some level, and because everybody knew by the time we were doing this interview that he was 91 at the time of the interview, that it was just a matter of time. And it was a bit of a taboo breaker to ask the questions, but I think people did appreciate being able to talk about it a little bit, and they certainly have since we were able to share it out since Walter died.
Yeah, absolutely. And what has that response been like, not just from maybe the inner circle, but also people throughout the community and where you've gotten to show this beautiful film?
Well, it mostly it has aired through the Oregonian. They picked it up the next day.
Wow.
And I think it's had over 11 no, actually I think it's had like over 14,000 views at this point
Wow.
via the Oregonian. And they were the right partner for us for this piece. They have certainly covered Darcelle in many ways over the years. And the chief editor of content, Teresa Bottomley, certainly personally knows Darcelle. And I had worked both with Darcelle and with Teresa on the other project that's at the Klamath.
Yes.
And so there were good connections there already to make sure that that moved forward in that space.
Wow, that's great. I'm so glad to hear that. And for you personally, what did you take away from making, having this film come about, the stories and listening? And then maybe what do you hope people take away after watching it themselves?
Oh gosh, well, I certainly felt very honored that we were able to pursue this and have this opportunity. Initially, there had been a little pushback about even working with Darcelle, since so many other people had covered Darcelle in various ways, and I was like, well, I don't care. I want to talk to Darcelle. And I had been to see the show already, and I knew that this would visually be very interesting, and I have a real eye for character. I mean, this is a pretty easy one or low hanging fruit in that regard, but if you're going to work on a video project, you want to have interesting characters
Yeah.
and vibrant people. And if we're going to do something on Old Town, you can't really leave Darcelle out of the storyline. So I was pretty insistent that we move forward with it.
Wow.
And I've really feel like we were able to nurture important community relations at that time that I've continued to cultivate in various ways. Um, and especially with Bambi,
Oh,
because that ultimately, when I went down on behalf of the Oregonian 2 nights after Walter died, all of the news outlets were there.
Mhm.
Everyone was getting coverage, but I was the only person that knew to interview Bambi. So I
Wow.
got that follow-up interview with her, and I was really pleased that, she was willing to talk to me. She wouldn't have talked to anybody else probably.
Right.
But it was because we had connected and we had had some time together, and she had helped us with this. And Walter was wonderfully generous when we did interview him, and then I was able to go back and interview with him again. And Christina visited with him several times to get
Wow.
follow-up B-roll on taking his makeup on and off.
Right.
So she followed along several times.
That's excellent. And it's such beautiful footage too. I do love the B-roll of everything. So wow, it just added so much to the documentary itself and everything. So
Yeah, Christine is very, very gifted, and she did a wonderful job with that. We also had stepped up our game a little bit because we were able to borrow some really um, high-end lenses for the cameras we were working with,
nice.
and I
Yeah.
think it shows. It made a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, just kind of to follow up on that question, when you see people watching this film, is there a hope that you hope they take something away from it or any main theme? I mean, for me, when I watched it, I just loved Walter's like confidence, and he says something so beautiful about like how all the people that he's loved who have passed away, like they were able to do it, and so I'm able to do it too.
Yeah.
And so it just really kind of speaks to the heart of it, and this I don't know, just encompassing love. And I just thought it was so beautifully done and so beautifully well spoken. So, are there any thoughts that you have for people who watch it online or in person?
Well, like you're saying, I think that we don't often get the opportunity to sit with our elders and ask questions about their encroaching death.
Yeah.
But we should. We all should. And not everyone can speak about it as eloquently as someone like Darcelle can.
Yeah.
But Darcelle was very generous in having those conversations. And it's not often that you get to do that with someone who is a living legend, someone who is
Yeah.
truly a treasure. And I mean, Darcelle was a treasure, not just to the city of Portland, but to the state of Oregon and well beyond.
Mhm.
I attended the service that they had for him.
Wow.
The place, this was at oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the Portland Center, but the place was packed, and the lines went, outside and around the building and the block and everything. It was a big deal, and people came from all over the world to be there. And there's been many lovely tributes. I saw a huge poster spread that they did at one of the timber games, and they dropped this huge banner. I mean, it covered like a fourth of the size of the stadium,
Wow. Oh my
with
gosh.
Darcelle, and we'll never forget you, and that kind of thing. So very,
Oh,
very touching.
absolutely.
And there was a ceremony in New York. There's been other places too. People have honored him.
Oh, that's so special. And so for you, Sarah, what's next? What's looking like for you in the future? Any upcoming films or documentaries that you're working on?
Well, I'm in post-production right now for a video project about Oregon's Measure 110.
Oh, wow.
And I'm hoping that this will be a multi-piece project. This first piece is about peer support specialists, people that are on the ground working with clients that are receiving harm reduction and other services, transition services for drug treatment,
Wow.
services upon release from prison. So we'll see. I've got a few more weeks of the edit on this one, and I'm hoping that it will connect me to another financing source to continue the project.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, that sounds so interesting. We are so looking forward to seeing it. And we definitely wish you all the best and are so looking forward to celebrating with you in person next weekend. So thank you so much for your time and chatting with us about this super special film.
Thank you, Cassidy. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.